I swear I never thought I'd be the woman telling this story, the one where everything falls apart and suddenly you're questioning if your marriage was ever real to begin with. I'm Leah, 32, and I'm still trying to process how I went from high school sweetheart to whatever I am now. It all started in sophomore year chemistry class. Mr. Daniels paired us up for lab partners, me and this quiet, kind of cute guy named Kevin. He wasn't the type I usually went for, not a football player or one of the popular guys, just this regular dude who worked at his uncle's hardware store after school. But there was something about him, the way he actually listened when I talked, how he'd get this little crease between his eyebrows when he was concentrating on getting our experiments just right. We started dating a few months later. It wasn't some epic romantic movie moment. He just asked if I wanted to grab pizza after school, and somehow we never stopped hanging out after that. Evan was my constant through all the high school drama. While I was bouncing between friend groups and trying to figure out who I was, he was just steady. I liked that about him, at least back then. After graduation, we both went to community college. I was going to be a nurse, he was doing business management. Plans changed. I ended up becoming a medical assistant instead, and he got pulled into his current job. We got married in this tiny ceremony at my parents' backyard when we were 23. Nothing fancy, just close family and friends. My mom kept saying we were too young, that I needed to experience life before settling down, but I was sure Kevin was it for me. Our first apartment was this cramped one bedroom with barely functioning AC and neighbors who fought like cats and dogs at 2 a.m., but it was ours. I remember how excited we were arranging our secondhand furniture, planning our future. We'd save for a house, have a couple kids, maybe get a dog. The normal dream. Looking back, I can see the little signs even then. How Kevin would rather stay in while I was always trying to drag him out to bars with my friends. How I'd get bored when he talked about his 5-year financial plans. How I'd sometimes catch guys checking me out and feel this little thrill, even though I never acted on it. But they seemed like normal differences, the kind every couple has. The first real change came when I got my job at the clinic. Suddenly, I was surrounded by these successful, educated men: Dr. Wilson, Dr. Matthews, Dr. Patel, Dr. Lawson, all of them accomplished and, if I'm being honest, most of them attractive. They treated me differently than Kevin did. They noticed when I got my hair done, laughed at my jokes, made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in years. I started forgetting my wedding ring at home. Not every day, just sometimes. I told myself it was because I was washing my hands so much at work or because it would catch on my gloves, but deep down I knew. There's something about being perceived as possibly available that changes how men interact with you. And I liked it. I started going out for drinks after work just to unwind with the team. Kevin would text asking when I'd be home, and I'd feel this flash of annoyance. Why was he checking up on me? Didn't he trust me? Couldn't I have friends? But of course, I'd never say that. I just texted back soon and ordered another round. When I got home, Kevin would be there, always there, sometimes already asleep, sometimes pretending he hadn't been waiting up. He'd ask about my day, and I'd give vague answers, not because anything inappropriate had happened, it hadn't, not yet, but because I didn't want to share those parts of my life with him. They were mine, my work friends, my fun, my escape. We were still having sex back then, but it was becoming less frequent. I'd be too tired, or he'd be too tired, or one of us would fall asleep watching TV. When it did happen, I'd sometimes catch myself thinking about Dr. Matthews' hands, or the way Dr. Wilson's voice got all deep when he was focused on a patient. I never told Kevin. How could I? My mom, never Kevin's biggest fan, started noticing the distance between us. Men need to be kept on their toes, she'd tell me during our weekly lunch dates. He's too comfortable with you. Men are hunters. They lose interest when there's no chase. I'd nod, soaking it in, wondering if she was right. Was Kevin's steadiness the thing I once loved most about him? Actually, the problem? Our 5-year anniversary came and went with a mediocre dinner at Olive Garden and a perfunctory exchange of cards. Kevin got me this silver bracelet I pretended to love but never wore. I got him a watch that was slightly over our budget. He kissed me and said he couldn't believe how lucky he was to have me. I smiled and said I felt the same. But inside, I was wondering if this was all there was, if this quiet life with this increasingly familiar man was all I'd ever have. Sometimes I'd catch Kevin looking at me with this expression I couldn't quite place, like he was trying to solve a puzzle, like he was wondering who I'd become. Or maybe that's just me projecting now, looking back with the knowledge of what was coming, because things were about to change. I was about to change, and our nice, normal life was about to implode in ways neither of us could have imagined. That first real shift happened around our 7th year of marriage. Kevin had been putting in crazy hours trying to move up from his position to something with better pay. I'd tell him he looked tired, that the stress was aging him. It wasn't meant to be cruel, not at first, just an observation, but I started noticing how the shadows under his eyes deepened, how his hairline was slightly receding, how he'd grown when he got up from the couch like some old man. Meanwhile, I was thriving at work. The doctors all had their favorite medical assistants, and I somehow became everyone's go-to. Dr. Wilson especially seemed to appreciate having me assist with his patients. He'd wink at me when a procedure went well or touch my shoulder when walking past. Nothing inappropriate. At least, that's what I told myself. My mom noticed the shift during one of our lunches. "You're glowing," she said. "Is it a new skincare routine, or is it those handsome doctors you work with?" She laughed when I rolled my eyes, but then leaned in closer. "You know, marriage doesn't have to be a prison." Kevin should be grateful he has a wife other men find attractive. It keeps him on his toes. I started spending more and more time with my work friends. Happy hours stretched into dinners. Texts during off hours became normal. I'd be lying in bed next to Kevin laughing at something Dr. Matthews sent me while Kevin scrolled mindlessly through his phone before falling asleep. Our sex life had basically flatlined. When I tried to initiate, Kevin seemed distracted or too tired. When he tried, I found myself making excuses. I didn't connect these dots at the time, but looking back, I think this was when he started turning to porn. The bathroom door locked a little too often. The browser history cleared too frequently. I pretended not to notice. The financial dynamic between us shifted too. Kevin was covering most of our bills: mortgage, utilities, car payments. I contributed, but most of my paycheck went to things I wanted: new clothes, skincare, drinks with coworkers, weekend brunches. When Kevin gently suggested a budget, I snapped at him, asking if he was monitoring my spending now. He backed off immediately, that hurt look in his eyes that used to make me feel guilty, but now just irritated me. I started seeing Kevin less as a partner and more as an obstacle, an obligation, the background character in my exciting new life. Was that fair? No, but it was how I felt. The breaking point of this phase was when Kevin tried to join me at a work happy hour. I didn't explicitly tell him not to come, but I didn't hide my annoyance either. He sat there awkwardly as my colleagues and I chatted about patients and office politics he couldn't possibly understand. When Dr. Wilson made a joke about how lucky Kevin was to have me, Kevin smiled tightly and said, "I know," but the way he looked at me across that table, I knew something had changed. He was seeing me with new eyes, and I wasn't sure he liked what he saw. The next morning, he tried to talk to me about it. "I felt like I was intruding last night," he said carefully, "like you didn't want me there." "Don't be ridiculous," I replied, not looking up from my phone. "You're just not used to my work friends. It's fine." But we both knew it wasn't fine. There was a crack in our foundation, and instead of trying to repair it, I was quietly watching it spread. The texts started innocently enough. Dr. Wilson would check in about a patient, then the conversation would drift to more personal topics. How was my weekend? Was I enjoying the book he recommended? Had I tried that new restaurant downtown? Kevin never asked me these questions anymore. We were past that stage, I guess. But with Dr. Wilson, I felt seen again, interesting again. One night, Kevin asked to use my phone to call his mom. His battery had died. I handed it over without thinking, then watched his face change as notifications from Dr. Wilson lit up the screen. Nothing explicitly inappropriate, but the frequency and familiarity were enough. Kevin scrolled through our conversation history, his expression darkening. "What is this?" he asked, his voice unnervingly calm. "What is what?" I countered, immediately defensive. "I'm not allowed to have friends now." "Friends don't text each other at midnight, Leah? Friends don't send messages like, thinking of you today?" I snatched my phone back. "Are you seriously spying on me right now, going through my private conversations?" "That's a real trust issue, Kevin." "Trust issue." His voice cracked slightly. "You're having an emotional affair with your boss, and I'm the one with the trust issue?" I laughed, actually laughed in his face. "An emotional affair? Are you kidding me? This is exactly why I don't tell you about work stuff. You blow everything out of proportion." The argument escalated from there. I accused him of being controlling, insecure, jealous of my success. He tried to explain that he was concerned about boundaries, about respect for our marriage, but all I heard was a man trying to clip my wings. What Kevin didn't know, what I didn't fully acknowledge myself at the time, was that I'd already consulted a divorce attorney just to understand my options. I told myself it was just to be prepared. I'd been gathering financial information, documenting our arguments, building a case, not because I definitely wanted out, but because something in me needed an escape hatch. When we finally exhausted ourselves arguing, Kevin asked me point blank, "Do you still want this marriage?" I answered without hesitation, "Yes." But even as I said it, I wondered if it was true. That night, as Kevin slept beside me, I deleted my conversation history with Dr. Wilson and added a passcode to my phone. Not because I had anything to hide, I told myself, but because I deserved privacy, because Kevin had broken my trust by snooping. I was getting good at twisting the narrative to make myself the victim. Too good. The weeks that followed existed in a strange limbo. Kevin and I moved around each other like cautious strangers sharing a space. He stopped asking about my day. I stopped pretending to care about his. The silence between us grew heavier, filled with all the things we weren't saying. At work, I found myself sharing more and more about my marital problems. Not with everyone, just with my closest male colleagues. Dr. Matthews would listen sympathetically as I explained how controlling Kevin was becoming. Dr. Patel would assure me that I deserved better. Dr. Wilson would hint that if I were his wife, he'd never take me for granted. I didn't realize then how inappropriate it was to share intimate details of my sex life with these men, how I was turning my marriage into workplace entertainment, how I was betraying Kevin's trust in ways far worse than him checking my messages. One particular Thursday stands out in my memory. I was assisting Dr. Wilson with a procedure when he casually asked, "Late night last night?" I looked at him questioningly. "You seem tired," he explained. "Trouble at home?" I sighed dramatically. "Kevin's been impossible lately, so moody, so distant. And in the bedroom?" I trailed off suggestively. Dr. Wilson raised an eyebrow. "His loss," he said, his gaze lingering on me a beat too long. That little exchange gave me a thrill that I hadn't felt with Kevin in years. I was desired. I was interesting. I mattered. What I didn't consider was how my colleagues might be discussing me when I wasn't around. The screenshots they might be sharing, the way they might see me not as a friend, but as entertainment, as potential prey. That evening, I told Kevin I was going out for drinks with the girls. A lie he didn't question, though I suspect he knew the truth. Instead of confronting me, he simply nodded and said he'd probably be asleep when I got home. I felt powerful as I walked up the door. I had options. Kevin was just too insecure to handle it. But power, built on deception, is always fragile, and mine was about to come crashing down around me. The night everything imploded started innocently enough. Kevin and I had been maintaining our Cold War for weeks, communicating only when absolutely necessary. I'd been spending more time with my work friends, coming home later and later, offering no explanations. Kevin had stopped asking. But then Dr. Wilson suggested a group dinner at this upscale new restaurant downtown, the kind of place that would drain Kevin's wallet, but that my colleagues wouldn't think twice about. For reasons I still don't fully understand, I invited Kevin to join us. Maybe I wanted to show him off, prove that we were still a normal couple. Maybe I wanted to make him feel out of place among my sophisticated friends. Maybe I just wanted witnesses to what our marriage had become. Whatever my motivation, Kevin agreed. He even wore that blue button-down I used to love, the one that brought out his eyes. For a brief moment, as we drove to the restaurant, I remembered why I'd fallen for him all those years ago. Then we arrived, and reality set in. Dr. Wilson, Dr. Matthews, Dr. Patel, and Dr. Lawson were already there, ordering expensive wine and laughing about some patient's ridiculous self-diagnosis. Kevin sat stiffly beside me, clearly feeling out of place but trying his best. I immediately slipped into my work persona, louder, flirtier, more animated than the woman Kevin knew at home. I barely included him in conversations, and when I did, it was often to use him as the punchline of a joke. Kevin still thinks a colonoscopy and endoscopy are the same thing, I told the table, rolling my eyes. They laughed. Kevin smiled tightly. The real turning point came after our second bottle of wine. Dr. Patel was sharing a story about a patient with sexual dysfunction when I decided to take it a step further. Speaking of which, I said, loud enough for the entire table to hear, any of you guys want to write a prescription for my husband? We could use some help in the bedroom department. I nudged Kevin playfully, as if he should find this amusing. The table went awkwardly silent for a beat before Dr. Patel laughed. Most common cause of ED in younger men is usually a porn addiction, just saying. I saw Kevin's face drain of color. His most private struggle, the one thing he'd never discussed with anyone but that I'd somehow picked up on, was now dinner conversation. Layla, he said quietly, a warning in his voice, but I was too far gone, too wrapped up in the attention. What? I asked innocently. These are doctors. They deal with this stuff all the time. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. Kevin barely spoke. I drank too much. My colleagues exchanged glances I couldn't read. When the check came, Kevin silently handed over his credit card, despite the fact that it would probably max it out. The car ride home was deadly quiet for the first few minutes. Then Kevin spoke, his voice so controlled it scared me a little. What the hell was that? What was what? I countered reflexively. You humiliated me in front of your entire workplace. You shared our private life with a table full of men who already don't respect me. You made me into a joke. You're being dramatic, I said, though part of me knew he wasn't. They're my friends. We joke around. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal? His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. You told them I can't satisfy you sexually. You sat there while they speculated about my porn use. How is that not a big deal? The argument escalated as we drove. Every grievance we'd been harboring came pouring out. His resentment about my male friends, my frustration with his jealousy, his hurt over my spending habits. I pay for everything, Layla, he said. The mortgage, the bills, the insurance. And what do you contribute? Shopping sprees and girls' nights that I'm pretty sure don't involve any actual girls. Well, duh, I spat back. You're the man. Don't you want to provide? Isn't that your job? I saw him flinch, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. The provider role was something he took seriously, a point of pride, and I'd just thrown it back in his face as an expectation, an obligation. That's not what marriage is supposed to be, he said quietly. It's supposed to be a partnership. But I'm alone in this, aren't I? I have been for years. I started to argue, but he cut me off. You want to know what hurts the most? He continued. It's not even the disrespect or the lying. It's that you're having fun with everyone except me. Your doctors, your work friends, they get your smile, your laughter, your energy. I get whatever's left over, which lately has been nothing. I pulled into our driveway, but neither of us made a move to get out of the car. You're just jealous because I have options, I said finally, because other men find me attractive and interesting. You can't handle a woman who has choices. Kevin looked at me for a long moment, something shifting in his eyes. You're right, he said finally. I can't handle this anymore. I'm done competing for my own wife's attention. He got out of the car and walked into the house, leaving me sitting there, my righteous indignation slowly giving way to an unfamiliar feeling of dread. Inside, I found Kevin pulling a suitcase from our closet. What are you doing? I asked, panic rising in my throat. What does it look like? He replied, methodically placing folded shirts into the case. I'm leaving. Don't be ridiculous, I said, trying to sound dismissive rather than desperate. Where would you even go? My brother's, he has a spare room. Kevin continued packing, not meeting my eyes. Over one stupid dinner? One joke that didn't land? You're overreacting. He stopped then and looked at me directly. This isn't about tonight, Layla. Tonight was just the final straw. This is about years of you making me feel like I'm not enough, like I'm some placeholder until something better comes along. That's not true, I protested, but my voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? He challenged. When was the last time you treated me with respect? When was the last time you were actually happy to see me? When was the last time you chose me over them? I had no answer. Kevin zipped up his suitcase. I hope your options make you happy, he said, and walked out the door. I stood there frozen, certain he would come back. This was just a dramatic exit, a power play. He'd cool off and return, and we'd have another argument, and eventually things would go back to normal. But he didn't come back. Not that night, not the next day. I called in sick to work, unwilling to face my colleagues after what had happened. Instead, I texted Dr. Matthews, who had always been the most flirtatious with me. His response was immediate and predictable. He offered to come over to check on me. When he arrived, there was no pretense of friendship. We barely spoke before ending up in my marital bed. It was exciting, forbidden, and completely empty. Afterward, as he quickly dressed to leave, I realized this had always been his only interest in me. Over the next few days, I discovered how quickly options can disappear. Dr. Matthews stopped responding to my texts after our encounter. At work, there was an awkward distance from the other doctors. Only Dr. Wilson maintained his interest, but his approach became more crudely direct, suggesting we grab a hotel room sometime since he'd heard good things. I was stunned to learn that Dr. Matthews had shared details of our encounter with the others. The realization that I had been a topic of their private conversations, that my marriage problems had been their entertainment, was humiliating. A week after Kevin left, Dr. Lawson approached me in the break room. I owe you an apology, he said awkwardly. We all do. The way we've acted. It wasn't right. Most of us have been uncomfortable with how things evolved, but nobody spoke up. What are you talking about? I asked, though I knew. The joke at dinner about your husband, the way we've all encouraged your behavior. It wasn't professional or decent. Your husband seems like a good guy who deserves better. His words stung with truth. When divorce papers arrived 2 weeks later, I panicked and called Kevin's family, playing the abandoned wife. His mother listened politely before saying, Layla, we've watched for years as you've belittled our son. Did you think we didn't see it? Did you think he never talked to us? Reality came crashing down as I realized my carefully constructed narrative had never fooled anyone except perhaps myself. Today, 6 months later, I maintain publicly that Kevin just couldn't handle me. I tell friends that I'm better off, that I'm enjoying my freedom. But at night, alone in our house that I can barely afford now, scrolling through dating apps full of men looking for hookups rather than connection, I wonder about the choices I made. The options I was so proud of turned out to be illusions. The attention I craved came with a price I never calculated. And the man who loved me despite my flaws, who would have given me everything if I'd only valued it, is gone for good. I still don't know if I could have done things differently, if I'm capable of being the kind of partner a marriage requires, if I'll ever find someone who looks at me the way Kevin once did. All I know is that having options means nothing if you choose the wrong ones, and I'm still not ready to admit that might be exactly what I did.